Thank you for joining us, everyone. As we get started, if you could open the chat, share your name, where you work, and where you're joining us from. And we will go ahead and get started. All right, so for this breakout session, we are focusing on rethinking internal government forms before the research. So thank you so much for joining from far and wide. My name is Lindsay Richardson. I am the director of the Service Design Studio, which is situated within the Mayor's Office of Economic Opportunity in NYC. And I'll pass to my partner, Megan.
Hello, my name is Megan Marini. I am Director of Outreach and Strategy at 3x3, and I'll pass it to my colleague Lucas.
Hello, everybody. I'm Lucas Vaqueiro, he, him. I'm a civic designer and work at 3x3 as well. And I'm excited to be with you all today.
All right. So a little bit more about me and my team. The Service Design Studio is a small team that works inside city government, inside New York City, and we spread service design and community design methodologies, often underused in government, through collaborations with city agency partners and capacity building. We work with community partners and New Yorkers to ultimately design effective, accessible, and dignified services in New York.
And 3x3 is an inclusive innovation studio. We're based in New York City, and we work with civic organizations to help them center community voices in their designs, programs, plans, and services.
Great. So the reason we're speaking together is because of a project that we partnered on in 2021 to 2022. Um, Beyond the Service Design Studio and 3x3, we worked closely with the Department of Social Services, DSS, which is the largest social service agency in the nation in New York City. And we worked with them to envision a social service innovation center, which we'll refer to as SSIC or the center throughout this presentation, with that would be housed within the Department of Social Services, that would use design research to improve existing services and pilot new ideas. So, as outputs of this project work, we conducted design research demonstration projects, and we created a knowledge hub to help DSS enable design research within the agency. And for today's purposes, we'll be focusing on two pieces from that design hub, which are the design research request protocol form and the participatory council protocol. A little bit more about the center. We really wanted this to be a place where folks could go to do service design and design research together. It would be situated within DSS's Office of Business Process Innovation, who is the product team behind Access HRA, which is the app that New Yorkers use to apply for and manage their public benefits. So the center would serve as an in-person and virtual hub where agencies, staff, community partners, and New Yorkers innovate together. Some values that led our speculative design process were design with, meaning collaborate with frontline staff, community partners, and New Yorkers with lived experience, center their dignity and care, establish protocols that center consent, choice, safety, and transparency, and innovate from within. Build the capacity of DSS's internal teams to safely carry out design research. The organizational structure behind the center was that it would be housed in the Business Process Innovation, the BPI team's office. So, in that way, they would oversee the center's operations, they would review design research scopes, they would coordinate with project leads, and provide technical assistance to the program teams using the center's offerings, and socialize the work after it's done. Supporting the BPI team would be the Office of Evaluation and Research, and this team currently reviews and approves all requests to conduct research on DSS services. And finally, the program team. So these are program area experts that would submit project requests, allocate program staff time to scope, plan, and collaborate with the BPI team to do the projects. And when we say staff, we mean both program administrators and frontline staff directly serving New Yorkers. So, under the center's design research offerings, we speculated they would offer journey mapping workshops, focus groups and interviews, co-design sessions, and user feedback sessions.
Alrighty, so today the idea is for us to share some of the challenges that we faced and some of the strategies that we employed towards implementing SSIC at the Department of Social Services. And essentially, this initiative involved a lot of change management as we were setting up a new institution within an existing traditional, already running institution. So in this process, we not only introduced a new player in this field, but most importantly, we were introducing another way of thinking and working that was sometimes in odds with the structure that was already in place. And this tension was particularly evident in the ways that we conducted research as we proposed a more designerly way to do so that involved, as Lindsay said, journey maps, co-creation sessions, and so on and so forth. And the frameworks that were in place didn't really accommodate for that. So Megan and Lindsay will share in a second a bit more of the nitty gritty of what we did. But before, I'm just going to contextualize a little bit this change that we are propelling. So very quickly, what is design research after all? And then the way that we understand design research here is the systematic process of one, designing to discover new knowledge, so making something to discover something new, but also um, uh, learning something new so we can make something out of it. So when we say design research here, we are trying to convey this combination of both research through design and research for design, right? So we're always making something new and discovering things, and discovering things to make something to, in that case, a bunch of resources so New Yorkers could access their public benefits. And in practice, this design-led research works in a particular way that is a little bit different from other traditional modes of research that these institutions are more accustomed with. So design research is really exploratory. We don't know what we will end up making when we start a process. We engage in different rapid iterative circles to get closer and closer to that idea. But in the beginning of a process, we don't really know what we're going to end up doing. Design research is making heavy, so we are always producing tangible artifacts to learn and create feedback loops with these artifacts. So we learn through this making process. In contrast, really traditional scientific research is way more systematic, right? It starts with a hypothesis that to be validated, and through structured engagements that we are trying to prove if that hypothesis is right or wrong. And usually traditional research moves way slower than design research, and it often requires controlled environments that will produce generalizing insights. So we have to have a lot of more clearance to do traditional research. So what we saw here in our project, in the initiative, um, is that one, there's no better way to do research than another. We need both of those ways of conducting research. But what we saw at SSIC was a tension between these two, because in the current institutional framework that was in place at the Department of Social Services, they were made for traditional research, right? Which is something that really makes sense. Like, because in fields like social services or healthcare, where a bunch of scientific studies are conducted often, and we need to deal with regulations, sensitive data, client information that is protected. Of course, we're going to have a more systematic institutional framework for approving those. But the process of vetting all of those research frameworks wouldn't really work for a design-led research initiative because they are just too long, and because a bunch of other ethical and legal parameters need to be really analyzed here. So if you could pass to the next slide. So what we saw here at SSIC, and we were observed more and more, this traditional research framework was the question that we had was how to default from this traditional framework to another framework that was more designerly. So making really easier for us to test wireframes and other kinds of design goods. So the question we had here was how might we create room for design research in institutions that use traditional research frameworks, and we found different strategies to do so, like creating a flagship project to show that it's possible to conduct research in a different way, but also bringing different internal stakeholders together would allow us to minimize really friction between new versus old areas. Also understanding the current state of research protocols and really greenlighting some new protocols so we can really identify pain points and resolve tensions with some trauma informed approaches to really avoid going into old frustrations. And finally, one thing that we saw really here was organizing all of the knowledge produced in a shareable and actionable way. So we also want to make sure that all of those tools and frameworks, templates, whatever we make, are tested within that DSS context and pre-vetted by key stakeholders. So without further ado, today we're going to talk about three of those strategies. So we're going to talk about a demonstration project that we made with the supportive housing team, and we're also going to talk about a knowledge hub that we created to enable design research. That is precisely where the form dwells, and also some of the standard operational procedures for participatory councils, so we could create a more perennial structure for conducting rapid research. I'll pass it to Lindsay so we can talk a little bit more about OSAS.
All right, thanks, Lucas. So, lead by example with demonstration projects. We did this to better understand the current and traditional research process at DSS and to demonstrate how internal forms can be adapted to enable journey mapping as an approved design research practice at the center, and to show how journey mapping can improve services. So on this project, it was, again, the Service Design Studio 3x3 and DSS's Office of Supportive and Affordable Housing team. And we worked together to run a journey mapping workshop with housing specialists who worked in DHS shelters across NYC. And we worked with them in this workshop to find ways to improve the supportive housing referral process by reducing the no-show rate for apartment viewings. So OSAS was seeing that a lot of clients were missing that first appointment where they would get to view a supportive housing unit, and our goal was to reduce that no-show rate. So as an outcome from this project, we created a map that documented the current referral process, pain points the housing specialists articulated, and opportunities to improve. Along with these opportunities were detailed recommendations of how the referral process would change. And we facilitated strategic planning with the team to identify roles and next steps. So larger than the project, we also, again, increased our understanding of the current research process at DSS, and we deepened relationships with agency teams that were needed in order to change those internal processes and have the teams adopt a new form. So here is us in action at the workshop. And here's an asset of us organizing the recommendations by feasibility and impact, and also color coding based on who would move the recommendation forward. All right.
All right, so I'm going to talk a bit about our Knowledge Hub. In any large agency, new research projects often start from scratch and encounter friction around compliance, security, and approvals. And starting a new research effort can be so slow that it doesn't align with design or delivery timelines. So the Knowledge Hub was our way of removing that friction. It's a curated set of tools that are already vetted and contextualized for the Department of Social Services here. And the hub makes it easier for teams to initiate and say yes to research because the tools are familiar, compliant, and ready to use. Next slide. The toolkit that we developed consisted of a broad suite of tools ranging from a project dashboard for organizing and communicating about project resources and tasks to community sharebacks. So findings are fed back to staff, clients, and other key stakeholders. And it's important to note that these aren't new inventions, but best practices and validated for the context of the center. And the research protocol template is really the centerpiece here. So now we're going to start getting into the forms, which you're all here for. This was a streamlined, pre-approved form to lower the barrier to starting research. And it really, in doing so, functions as the intermediary between the Office for Evaluation Research in this context and the team that was seeking to embark on design research. To build it, we started by mapping what the existing protocol or protocols were and what existing assets existed for new research requests and approvals as a way to identify what are the challenges, where are the barriers, and where might there be opportunities for streamlining the process. So here you can see our kind of beautiful mind map of this that shows that these processes are hardly ever simple or straightforward. Next slide. So where we landed was a tool to help streamline reviews and approvals by facilitating dialogue about the research process, as well as structuring the research itself. We adapted the existing protocol from the Office of Evaluation Research with some modifications, like designing pre-approved language for outreach and recruitment, as well as project background about the center. Next slide. We added prompts for teams to clearly define their research questions. We added standard language for recurring methods like surveys and journey maps, and as a means to help support both novice and experienced researchers in framing out their work and understanding the range of methods they could apply. And we also covered important sensitive topics like confidentiality and release of findings that are often the sticking points in a way to balance this sort of like rapid research approach with respect for privacy, dignity, and informed consent. So by systematizing these steps, the research protocol form really functions as a launch pad for new design research efforts, leading to faster starts, more consistent safeguards, and building more space for meaningful inquiry and trauma-informed practices. Next slide. But because inquiry and adaptation, which is really why we're doing design research, it doesn't end when a research sprint ends. The center also needed a standing structure for incorporating more continuous feedback in an ongoing way to evolve its Access HRA platform. So our answer to this was a participatory council that was intended to provide ongoing user testing and feedback on new enhancements, or I'll call them public releases, at all stages, so from early concepts to live prototypes. And the goal here is to get quick design feedback before new public launches. And in doing so, you help prevent time-intensive or costly design flaws while also ensuring smoother client experience on the platform itself. So to show that this was not unprecedented to build also buy-in for this idea, we looked to global best practices. The UK government digital service was one that we looked at really closely. They built a user panel that was a database of individuals who volunteered to participate in research. So in this context, recruitment's open to anybody. You can sign up via the gov.uk site, which supplements their other recruitment channels and helps to ensure a diversity of participants to overcome that super user kind of model where you're getting feedback from the same person, but for many different things. They also built a tailored CRM to provide the infrastructure behind the panel. The CRM was designed to meet security standards and also enable other departments to license it. So in that way, it provided scalability across governmental entities, and it enabled researchers to query the database in order to find participants by characteristics that were relevant to their research aims. So next slide. So we got to work here in helping the center establish its pool of clients and community-based organizations to draw from for future feedback and research efforts. And we started by building a screening tool to help ensure that panel diversity, but also to streamline consent, informed consent, by embedding that language into the call for participants and survey. And this was also conceived of as a mechanism for streamlining compensation, where participants get paid to test the new releases to fairly acknowledge their time and expertise. And along this journey, we realized that if clients were going to be involved, that it would not only require extensive IRB approvals, the institutional review board kind of approvals, in ways that didn't align with the timeline for the releases, but we also really needed different program area teams to be involved throughout the entire organization. So we reoriented the council as a mechanism for incorporating user feedback from frontline staff with program teams that work most closely with clients, like SNAP staff or cash assistant staff. And this was a way to test out new releases that the Business Process Innovation Unit wanted to develop but didn't know if they would be good ideas or not. And in this way, representatives from each program area could test releases to see if they were on the right track without needing to go through any internal research vetting. So here you can see the organizational model from earlier. And by thinking about the council not just as an additional group, but as really the connective tissue between the key units, it helped ensure that the Access HRA feedback and enhancements weren't sitting in isolation, but rooted directly in program operations, technical development, and evaluation processes. And it also enabled cross-team collaboration to build a culture of shared problem solving across the program areas and contributing to staff really feeling valued for their insight and input. Next slide. So just to give an example here, I find use cases always important. One of the use cases we identified was for a way to merge link duplicate Fairfare's clients in the database. So here the learning goal was to understand what's the best call to action for frontline staff users to access this action for merging and linking the duplicate clients. And we wanted to test out what's the best language to use, what are the most effective action prompts to use. And here we really needed to bring in Fairfare's program staff to help shape those learning goals in order to launch this new sort of design inquiry and panel. So next slide. And in identifying the use case or the new release that we would want to really focus on, that initiated a new panel process, what I'll call design panels, or another instance of the participatory council in action. And that really begins with defining what is the candidate design to test. So, like, what is the screen or what is the feature that we want to release, that we want to test out. And in thinking about this flow, we wanted to ensure that the council's activities and feedback are not only captured, but translated actually into the design requirements for integration into the final design outcomes. And so we conceived of this as a loop where the panel could be reconvened to iterate through the design process as our inquiry unfolded. And briefings also were another important step here to help leadership see staff contributions and incorporate findings into decision making. So here's a little peek into the initiation process. I'm not going to go into it, but you can kind of get a sense of all the things that need to happen, all the tasks that need to happen before a new panel can be run. And no matter how streamlined you can make it, it's still a lot of work. So to this end, we realized that core staff capacity would be a challenge, which is also something we learned through our first demonstration project that Lindsay walked through. So next slide. To ensure capacity building and skill building remains a core focus of this, we designed a modular roles and accountability framework to make sure that the roles required to run this were assigned according to staff interest and capacity. And while the business process innovation team would play a key coordinator role, the other roles were left to the discretion of the project area teams, and to be determined at a new panel initiation. So we also identified key staff that had motivation and interest to play involved roles by contributing part of their time in an ongoing way through FTEs or full-time equivalencies. So this model really shows how institutionalizing design research and organizational infrastructure to that end can really make user testing and design research not just possible, but also routine. And I'm going to pass it to Lucas to go through our key takeaways.
Thanks. And I'll try to be brief so we can enjoy like our last 15 minutes together with like some questions and a conversation with you all here. But essentially, through all of these projects that we tried to push forward to activate SSIC, it really became clear to us that this tension that we first saw between design research and traditional research actually illuminated a broader tension propelled by this attempt to change the culture of an organization, right? So when we understand these beyond a methodological stance or beyond the form in itself that we were trying to change, we could also think about these challenges as really a change management process. So and that really opens up a door that we can think about what are the strategies that we can employ, what are the things that we can do so people can be at ease with changing. So we can show people that it's okay to do things differently, to show folks that it's nothing personal against whatever was being done in the past. It's just a different way to work and a different way to organize things. And it's in the end of the day is a people's game and a convincing game and in a care game, caring with towards people that really work around all of those forms and all of those ways and processes that sustain the research in the institution that already exists, right? So many are the strategies to organize change management in an organization, but in the case of SSIC and in the two in the initiatives that we just showed you, folks, we really learned that demonstration projects stressed or worked really well to show the importance of the center and the importance of new kinds of research. And most importantly, these projects served as platforms for relationship building and for internal buy-in for design research. So in the end of the day, more importantly than the journey that we created with these folks was to make room so everybody could sit on the same table, and we understand where the gaps of skills were at, where are the different, where the governance of the projects, and where are the different responsibilities and the different agenda items that everybody is really responsible for. So projects as such can really work as platforms for relationship building, buy-in, and change management. And also, secondly, the knowledge hub that we created also enabled the making of standard operational procedures that were tested, functioning, and vetted in practice and within an institution, and that really supported the conduction of design research. So we didn't really change the form in itself, as we did not really have the governance over the form. It was not our form to change, but we create an infrastructure around it so we could make it easier for other initiatives to emerge with less friction. Our idea was, okay, how can we, through a knowledge hub, really create a framework to lower the friction between the old and the new, so we can have room for other design practices to emerge. And yeah, so this was some of our takeaways, but we wanted to leverage the fact that we are over 100 people here, and we wanted to really hear from you. We separated three questions that are lingering questions for us, and we wanted to know from your perspectives as well. So you can feel free to share your thoughts in the chat if that's easier. I also know there's a way to raise a hand, and if you want to really share it out loud. But yeah, please use those features to participate. And the first question that we had, and we wanted to hear from you all, is how have you distinguished in your practice design research versus traditional research at all? Is this a question for you guys, or is this something that is a given or you've never stumbled upon?
Lucas, I also want to just point to the Q&A. I think there are a number of questions popping up while folks are stewing on that question. So the first is, do you have guidance on deciding between in-person versus remote research? Lindsay, Lucas, want to weigh in there?
The service design studio, I mean, we just think about the people who we're going to be doing research with and what will work best for them. So if they're time strapped and they might only have 20 minutes, then we might do a virtual session. If they don't have access to a laptop or might find virtual uncomfortable, then we'll frame it as an in-person project. Um,
Yeah.
did the form address this? I think is probably the question, and I can't recall if we did that on this form iteration or not.
I also see some comments about the our question about design research and traditional research, right? So Libby says that we have to distinguish design research from academic research in their cultural institution. Jillian is saying that design research versus traditional research really depends on the application and how specific or general the final application is. And somebody just hearted that one. Perhaps we could also move to the second question that we had for everybody, or we could go through some other Q&As. I see that we have a couple of questions here. What do you all think?
Yeah, I think there's one more question that we just received. If we could talk a little bit more about how we bypass the need for IRB protocol. My understanding is that you use staff users as proxies for end users, which I've had to do before as well. Has this been successful? How did you grapple with knowing if your testing with proxies revealed the same things as testing with real end users?
I can take a stab on that one. And you are correct. The way that we bypassed the need for R&B approval was through like staff users as proxies for end users. And that is like a valid and a very common strategy, right? That we use so we can better understand how this thing is being done. And not much in this project, but in other initiatives as well. I think the most important thing here is to understand what is the kind of research that we are doing, and what is the questions that we have, and what are the needs and the users of such initiative, right? Because if we are doing like a plain UX um, um, evaluation, and it's like in the beginning of like the development process with like some wireframes, it's working with proxy users uh, really works. So usually the data that you're going to receive is pretty much closer to what a real user would do, because these folks really work with users or clients in that case all the time, every day. So they really know that the if the language is not really working, or if the form is too confusing, or one thing that we learned when we did the journey mapping exercise with some of the housing specialists was that one of the forms that clients had to um, uh, fill out was extremely triggering, because they had to talk about like their harm over and over and over. So that was already for us a key learning that was mapped in the begin in the project outcomes as like a next project that would be done. So I think it really depends on like what is the thing that we are testing and what is our end user. And usually like experience and interface design projects work really well with proxy users, as opposed to others that require more in-depth kind of discussions.
Um, I want to move on to this other question that's related. Do you ever use staff, for example, case managers, as proxies for design researchers? And I really love this question. Um, and I think that was kind of the aim of the participatory council, was to uh, make sure that we were centering capacity building and skill building through the Knowledge Hub as well, in order to invite staff in as co-researchers and not just as implementers. So yes, and also capacity remains a challenge towards that end. Lindsay, I don't know if you want to build on that.
Yeah, I would say that is a guiding best practice to work towards, while also remaining mindful of the benefits of co-facilitation and respecting people's time and the skill that it does take to safely facilitate design research. That those things are not learned quickly. So if you are enabling folks, you need to provide substantial training and support. And then, yeah, there's a lot. It's a process to work towards for sure.
And I see there was a question about like what platform the Knowledge Hub was built in that was replied, but I think it speaks to the thing that you just said, Lindsay. When we are also talking about change management, and when we understand this as also a through a change management lenses, we are also trying to minimize friction. So there's not like one of the ways to do so is to use platforms and ways to organize that are really closer or most intimate to folks. So in that case, all of the knowledge that we created was organized through Microsoft SharePoint. So very not boring but colorful spreadsheets and presentations and docs, because these were the closest to the people that would use it. So we didn't really need a fancy platform or anything. We needed something that would make it easier and more actionable to people to use. So they can really apply all of those learnings. And also somebody asked it about like the journey map that take a long time to make and also like get outdated really quickly. I see that there's also an answer about this one about that we worked in sprints, but I also welcome you all to think about these projects, especially this first one, as platforms for collective learning and for gaining legitimacy and internal buy-in for um, uh, more change that we wanted to do and to make a case for design research, right? So yes, of course, we had to deliver something that was useful with insights that were actionable for the team, but the project also was needed so all of these people could sit around the same table. Because imagine for a body that was always like in charge of research and doing research in a very specific kind of way, out of a sudden a new player arrives, a new stakeholder arrives wanting to do research in a different way. So of course there is potential to friction here and to dispute. And the way for us to ease that thing is creating spaces for like civic partnerships and for really a public kind of atmosphere to happen. And projects are a very effective way to do so. So the image that Lindsay showed of us divvying up different projects that were born out of this project really shows that like the project in itself created a moment that we could sit around the table and understand who would be responsible for what, and what are the new skills that we need, what are the skills that we already have in the house. And to the question also about IRB approval in the same project, we also, as we were walking through the data, we understood that the question that folks had about why people are not showing up to the interviews, it was a pretty expensive and extensive question that required like a slower and in-depth research, a lot of talks to people, and that it specifically had to go through like an RRB approval, and that was led by the OER team who had already the means to do so, as opposed to other form revamps that we wanted to do and communication revamps that we wanted to do, that these could be tackled through design research, so these could be tackled through another space.
I think there's one more question we haven't gotten to, which is how did your team manage the disruption process? And I will maybe interpret that as sort of like the change, organizational transformation, change management process. But if you were understanding that differently, please just indicate. But yeah, Lindsay, I don't know. I know you help teams with this frequently on the day to day, so I don't know if you want to take that one.
Well, I mean, this project was very disrupted many times by bureaucratic hurdles that we consistently came across. So I guess it was just being a nimble team that was responsive and respectful of the policies and procedures that were changing in real time, whether that was a hiring freeze that got in the way of hiring the amount of staff needed to run the center, or lack of awareness of where a policy came from and the time needed to understand like where the governance behind a particular policy was. I found that this team did best when we just found ways to bucket things that needed longer time and nimbly move to whatever we could work on next for the project to get through it, and follow up on things that needed more time to resolve or redesign around things that we're unable to resolve. Civic design, fun, never stops. So, great questions, everyone, and thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. And please feel free to drop us a line in case you want to keep this conversation going. These are our contacts, or reach us out there or through our LinkedIn's, whatever you prefer. It was very nice to hear from you all today.